So welcome everyone. I'm again grateful to be in this space with all of you. And if at any point you have any questions at all, feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me. I'm pretty easygoing. Also know that I'll leave some time at the end for any questions you might have as well. So, and for those who are here with us, if you have anything new to add or insights, by all means, do share those. Laura, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and also Chiazo recently went through this process as well, so she can share her experience as well.
But by all means, don't hold back. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Give me 1 second. All right, so hopefully you are able to see PowerPoint. Can I get a yes? So we're all able to see. Perfect, awesome. So understanding the FAFSA. Again, this is something that all students who are U.S. citizens or those who are eligible non-citizens, such as those who are permanent residents, are able to apply for the FAFSA each year that they're looking to attend college or university. So what is the FAFSA? FAFSA is short for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That's where we get that lovely term FAFSA. Right there, you'll have the link directly that if you click on, will take you to the application itself. You could also do FAFSA.gov. If you forget that link, that will also take you to the exact same link there to make sure you access the right form. The one thing I do want to emphasize I didn't include on here is that you want to make sure you're on the actual government website. There are a load of .coms, private companies who will attempt to charge you to complete this application on your behalf. You do not need to do that. This application can be completed by you with the information you have or for some homework in getting that stuff done. So keep that in mind. Any link that I have included on this presentation, which we'll be sharing out at the end, will have all the appropriate links for you to use if you complete the FAFSA. So this application is required and it's often needed by colleges and universities to determine any kind of need-based financial assistance. This application will look at your family's finances, yearly incomes, any savings accounts you might have to determine what your EFC is, which is your estimated family contribution. You'll get this fancy number. It could range from 0 all the way to $1 million, for example. And this is the government's effort in using their formula to determine how much money you and your family can contribute towards the cost of tuition at the institution you're applying at. So keep that in mind that you'll get this EFC once you complete your FAFSA. Now, when you complete your FAFSA, you'll receive, and I'll get into more details later, you receive financial aid award letter depending on your institution, but know that any financial aid you receive as a result of completing your FAFSA, it will remain active for that specific year. Any year that you wish to continue to attend school and receive financial aid assistance will mean that you will have to renew or reapply the FAFSA. And you will have to use, then again, your most current tax information and financial family finance information to complete that. The other thing I wanted to point out is that you do not need to be low income to qualify. Often there is a stigma, a disbelief that, oh, my parents or my family has too much money, or I make too much money, I'm not going to qualify for anything. You don't know what you could be qualifying for until you apply. Often folks will go, for example, straight to private loans from banks or other financial industries that will have loans available to you, but at very high interest rates. If you complete the FAFSA and you become eligible for any federal loan program, for example, you're often going to get federal interest rates at a very reduced rate, much more favorable to you than any private small bank loan that you might qualify for. So always know that when it comes to financial assistance, FAFSA is a good place to start. Your institution will often ask you to complete this form regardless of what your income is at, so they can see, use that information to determine, maybe a private loan is your option, or actually let's explore the federal route there. So keep that in mind. Do not think that you have to be poor to apply for this. This is something that I myself, as a current student and doctoral program, I submit the FAFSA every single year to make sure I can get any penny that I can to make sure my cost is low. So keep that in mind. Do what you need to do to complete the FAFSA. So deadlines to remember. The FAFSA becomes available to complete online on October 1st of every academic year. So for right now, if you're planning to attend college for the 2020-2021 academic year, you've been eligible to complete the FAFSA since October 1st, this past October 2019. So my advice to any student is to apply early. Often many colleges and universities want you to complete the FAFSA early so that they can deliver to you a financial aid award letter that makes most sense so that you can start planning. All right, for next year, how much will I need to take out on loans? How much can I start saving? And how much can we withdraw from, for example, current accounts that you and your family might have saved for college tuition? The neat thing too is that many colleges, and again, I don't put a date on this because it does range from college into college. But if you submit your FAFSA by, for example, November 15th, a month after it becomes available to you to complete, often colleges and universities will give you free money on top of that because you're actually saving them some work. So it's in your interest to complete it early on. That way you maximize the help, the assistance you could be eligible for. In addition, you're saying yes to often anywhere between $500 to $2,000 of additional free money just for completing it early. So please, please, please always keep in mind that if you have all your documents, and we'll go through that in a little bit, to complete this online as soon as possible. And quite frankly, it just gives you more time to plan and compare between colleges and universities as well. Uh, know that while this is a federal form, there is a connections to what your specific state you live in and what their specific financial aid program is in your given state. I've included on this presentation a link that will list all 50 states and territories with the specific deadlines you are to keep in mind so that if you have to submit the FAFSA for, let's say, Illinois, you have to submit that by February 1st to be eligible for not just only federal, but also for your specific state level financial aid assistance. So keep that in mind. That list will include all those details. Um, and then lastly, as I mentioned, pay attention to college specific deadlines. Often colleges, especially in the undergraduate level, are having scholarships really be distributed out in that late fall, early winter session. That's why they're asking you to complete the FAFSA early. If you complete the FAFSA early, they're able to quickly see and maximize the number of resources and financial scholarships you're eligible to get. Know that colleges and universities, whether they're public or private, are limited in funding sometimes. So it is in your interest to apply early to make sure you don't lose out on money you would have otherwise been eligible to receive. Does that make sense? So big day, October 1st, that's when everyone's eligible to complete it. And then when it comes to your specific situation at the state level, pay attention, look to that list to see when exactly you need to submit that by. And then when you look at the colleges you're interested in going in, whether it's community college, private college, or public university, look through those as well and see when do they want that by, because you want to maximize all the money you can get, so that way you have a reduced cost on the road. So this is a quick short, and this is just a screenshot of a FAFSA checklist, and this is from Education Quest Foundation. What I loved about this checklist, and I'll have a link directly to this full complete form at the end of the PowerPoint presentation, but it's going to tell you all the information you'll need to have ready with you before you even start your application. So before you even go to FAFSA.gov and get on your computer, look at this form, start collecting all this information, because that's the information you're going to have to submit once you start your application. And so this has your required information as well as where you're likely going to find it, hopefully. Take this, complete this. Once you complete this checklist, you're good to go. Go on FAFSA.gov and submit that application. So awesome little checklist. We'll have that available to you at the end of this presentation. Give me 1 second. My computer's being funny. There it is. So this is the big piece next. After you submit your FAFSA, you often will wait between 1 week to 2 weeks. And when you submit your FAFSA, what you're doing also is including the institutions, the colleges that you want to attend to make sure that they receive the results of your FAFSA too. So what does that mean? Let's say I want to go to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and I also want to go to the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities. Fantastic. I still haven't decided where I want to go yet I do know that I want to see what kind of financial aid assistance I would receive from each of those institutions. So as I'm completing my FAFSA, keep this in mind. It's going to ask you, hey, what colleges do you want to go to? You want to submit, and it'll allow you to search by state, city, and you'll be able to find a list of all the universities in the country, and you select the ones you want. When you complete your FAFSA, and the FAFSA and the government determines kind of the EFC, the information about you that determines, how much aid you might be able to give or how much you'll be able to pay on your own. Those two colleges, the University of Illinois and the University of Minnesota, will receive that information too. The reason being, now the college and the university will determine, based off the resources they have in private funds as well as public funds that they get, how much money they can give you. So each institution that you apply at will give you very different results based off your FAFSA, your EFC. So keep this in mind that you're going to receive a letter, usually, again, a week or 2 weeks after you complete that FAFSA and send that information to those specific colleges. And that's going to give you a data set of a year-long cost of attending that college or university, the cost of the room to live on campus if you decided to do that, as well as the cost of board, so meals that you might consume while being a student there. Sometimes they will include the cost of books, and oftentimes they'll include the cost of traveling there, so on and so forth. Um, it will also include a report of how much money you have become eligible for to receive. And it'll be broken down by grants. So grants, again, we'll have some definitions afterwards and resources for you. Grants is free money. This is money that generally you don't pay back. So if you have a lower EFC, you might get a larger grant, which is great, fantastic. You'll also see a list of loans. And loans is money that you are eligible to receive, usually at the federal level, that are going to come to you at a much more favorable terms to lower interest rates. This is, again, money that you can receive and use, but know that upon graduation or upon you ceasing to attend college, university, you'll have to pay back. Also know this, and I will show some examples in a little bit, you don't have to receive or accept all of the financial aid that you are awarded. Some universities will say, hey, you have received $5,000 in grant, fantastic, free money, but then you also have $5,000 in loans. Let's say you don't want loans or you don't want that much loan. You can say, hey, thanks for the $5,000, but maybe I'll just take $2,500 and then I'll work throughout the year. That's okay to do as well. You don't have to take in the entire package that you receive, especially on the loan piece. Take all the free money you can get, absolutely. But when it comes to the loans, think of future you, because eventually you're gonna have to pay that. And if that means working a little bit now to make that workload a little lighter down the road, by all means do so. On this slide, you have this link here at the bottom. This will give you a more detailed explanation of how to read different financial aid letters. Know this, every college and university is different. And there is sometimes colleges, universities will attempt to make their college look a little more affordable when it may not be. So be mindful that they do make it a little hard to understand financial aid award letters, but with some insights, some reading, if you read through that article, you'll be able to understand some of the nuances behind it and really start asking some good questions. And again, right here, really asking, does that letter clearly show the full cost of attending, and does it separate the kind of aid you might be receiving as well? So things to keep in mind. Now, we're going to look at some sample financial aid letters. Often your financial aid letter will say, hey, thanks, welcome XYZ person, can't wait to have you on campus. Here's your financial award letter. Please let us know by XYZ date whether you accept or not. Fantastic. You look at this thing and it's a lot of information with a lot of big numbers. This example we have here is actually probably one of the better examples of a financial aid award letter, but yet still, I have to acknowledge, is a bit overwhelming. At the top here, you have the estimated cost of attendance. So this here, you have the full $38,400, and that's going to include tuition and fees, good, your room and board. So they're including the cost of you living on campus. Looks like this institution covers some of the books, personal costs, and a computer. So this is an estimate. of what they think it will cost to attend that specific institution for 1 year. Below that, you have a breakdown of the different scholarships and grants you have become eligible for based off the FAFSA you submitted. So these first three loans are listed here as subsidized and unsubsidized, and you see that split between the 2 semesters. Again, as I said earlier, just because you're able to get all these loans doesn't mean you should. And it's also important to look at what subsidized and unsubsidized loans mean. Often the subsidized loan will be a much more favorable loan for you, as that means the government, federal government, will cover the cost of interest while you're in school. Versus an unsubsidized loan, that means that that loan will have interest accumulating from the moment you take it. So that's going to be more expensive down the road. This is why you likely will see that the amount you receive on a subsidized loan is a little higher than the amount you would receive in an unsubsidized loan. And that's because the terms are much more favorable for you in a subsidized loan. So again, nuances, we'll have a resource and definition list for you to check out later, but that's the big piece here. Any loan here, this is money you'll have to pay back eventually once you graduate or um, stop attending school. You're looking at several thousands of dollars for one specific year. Now, below that, you have here a school scholarship and different grants. This money, it's a $7,500 that for each semester, which ends up being $15,000. That's money that you're receiving from the college. That college could say, hey, because of your great performance in high school, we're giving you this merit scholarship. Fantastic. That means it's money you don't have to pay back. In addition, looks like your FAFSA made you eligible for these federal grants. So again, free money here, $1,000 there, $1,000 here, $2,000 that you don't have to pay back. Looks like your state awarded you $900 as well. And then you have federal work study. The federal work study is a program where if you work at a college or university, you are guaranteed a specific rate of pay there, up to that $3,000 for that whole given year. And that is money that you can either apply towards your tuition or have that, for other costs you might encounter. One thing to keep in mind, while all of this in the scholarship and grant money is great money, you would want to ask questions about what do they mean by that school scholarship? Because $15,000 is a lot of money. Is that a scholarship that you can get every single year? Because if it's only eligible for that first year, how are you going to make up that $15,000 that second year if it's gone? So again, asking these questions, hey, is this renewable for all 4 years? Or do I have to maintain a certain GPA? These are the questions that you may not get on that first sheet, but things for you to keep in mind. So this is, again, an example of actually a fairly good financial award letter breakdown piece. Now off to one that may not be so good. And this is one that you will likely see a lot. So please, please, please pay attention to this one. You'll see a breakdown. And in the cost of attendance, you see tuition, $30,500. And then you see fees, $2,000. Total direct cost, $34,000. Okay, great. And then you have your financial aid broken down. So again, you see the Pell grants, more grants. So you got some loans there. This person, their parents took out a loan for $12,000. So saying you got $28,000 of total financial aid, which means you subtract the total cost from the total money you received. You have $5,800 to pay for the whole year. That seems fairly affordable if you think about it, costs, all that stuff. But you don't realize in the cost of attendance up here, they've not included the cost of housing or your meals. And so this specific college might look cheaper to you than the other college that might say they're $10,000, but they're already including on that specific letter the cost of housing and meals. So while this letter looks cheaper, it may not be cheaper. So pay attention. Again, big reason as to why we need to make sure that when we ask that question of our letters, does it include the full cost? It needs to include more than tuition. It needs to include more than fees. And it needs to include your housing and meals. Because otherwise, you might be accepting and saying and paying a deposit for a college that once you start school there, it's actually going to be much more expensive for you. And they're going to force you to take out all these loans that you don't have to. So these are questions to keep in mind, comparing them with your family, but also your admission representative. The other thing I'll say quickly on this is do not feel afraid to bring all your financial aid letters and bring them to any specific college rep and say, this is the letter I got from this other college. It says it's much more cheaper than yours. Show me what you got. You're able to actually negotiate much more than people often think they are with colleges and universities. If they see that a college is offering you an additional $5,000, that college might say, okay, we'll match it. And, hopefully you can then determine from an equal basis of finances which college you want to go to. Or they might even go further and say, actually, here's a bigger scholarship. We really want you here. So do not hesitate to say, I'm going to bring in all my letters and I want you to be honest with me and say which college makes most financial sense for me. But also, hey, if you can go to another college for $5,000 cheaper, by all means do so and leverage that. Colleges and universities, especially in the private world, will often negotiate you much more than you think. And so encourage you to do that and ask these questions so that you don't end up with a bill that could have been reduced by several thousands of dollars. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So this is a nice little resource that, again, we'll be providing at the end of this presentation for you all. But this is from the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. So it's a national organization that works to make sure you all understand what finances are when it comes to loans and grants and all this case. You have the sheet, you can compare your financial aid letter from every single institution to see which makes most sense for you. This just makes it a little easier for you. So if you know that you're got 2 or 3 different options of colleges and universities, take the sheet with you and then fill that information in from all the information you have from those financial aid award letters you receive from those colleges and universities. And if there's any specific thing that's missing that you see, then that gives you permission to go back to that specific counselor and say, hey, I need this cost of housing, or I need this cost of books, or, if it's a really expensive science program, what's the cost of lab supplies? You want to keep all these things in mind because, to be honest, colleges may not necessarily give you all those details up front, and I don't want you all thinking that, oh, this is cheaper, when it may not necessarily be. So this is a worksheet that you'll be receiving as well at the end of this presentation. So here is just a quick summary of all the different links that I kind of talked about throughout this presentation. I included a couple extra ones. This tips from NASFA is really helpful. Often you'll find if you need things in a different language, the studentaid.gov website also has many of its forms available in different languages as well. With that, that is the bulk of kind of my presentation. I don't know if there's any questions, curiosities. I know it's a lot. It can be overwhelming. We do not really do a full dive into actually filling out the FAFSA, but know that is its own session on its own. But any general questions I could be answering about FAFSA or the financial aid piece, I'd be happy to take those right now.
I'm sorry, Sergio, did you discuss like being able to negotiate your financial aid package, or is that something you'd like to speak about?
Yeah, no, that's something I do want to emphasize. You will receive, that first initial financial aid award letter. Let's say it says that, you have $10,000 to pay after all the grants and after all the loans. And you're like, there's no way, I can pay that, or me and my family can put that together. Don't let that stop you. Go back to that counselor you're working with, or contact that financial aid office and say, I need something more than this. And be clear with how much more you need. Let's say you only need $2,000 more in assistance to be able to afford it, then say, hey, I need $2,000 more, and then you can guarantee me there as a student next year. Do share that out, because we need to know that on our end too, that, hey, if it's just going to take us, a couple of $1,000s more, we might be able to find you a different scholarship that you're eligible for. Or in some colleges and universities, they might have an alum who says, okay, I'll pay for this person. So do, as Laura mentioned, the negotiating piece, yes. And that's when I said earlier, if you receive a whole bunch of different letters, and let's say that number one school you really want to go to is really expensive, but that other school that you're like, okay, you wouldn't be mad if you attended, but you really don't want to go there, even though it's cheaper. Say that, hey, I really want to go to this, college, my number one dream school, but I need it to look more like this other school's pricing, and see what they can do for you. The worst case scenario, the college is going to say, nope, that's it. Okay, sounds good. Pack your bags and we'll look at something else. But you'll be surprised at how often you can get colleges and universities to come back with a second financial aid award letter, and it might be one that's much more favorable to you. The other piece that I didn't mention that is worthwhile sharing is, for example, you completed the FAFSA on October 20th, a few days after it opened, and you receive your financial aid award letter. And so it says, you're supposed to pay XYZ amount, but let's say something has changed in your family financial situation. Let's say mom lost her job and so that income's gone, or you've lost your job because that income's gone, or, right now because of COVID, a lot of people are really struggling financially. That's a reason to go back to your college and university and say, hey, my financial situation has changed. And then that will allow you to begin a new process of providing, we no longer get this paycheck a month. That's going to open up the door for new federal aid that you perhaps previously weren't eligible for. So always know that your financial aid planning office, your resource office, is going to be your biggest help in navigating those spaces. And do not hesitate to ask, because there's so many students who, in well-intentioned, are overwhelmed when something bad happens and think that no one can help. Well, don't let that be the case. Don't let that no be a real no until you hear it. Ask, negotiate, be specific with your needs, and that will serve you well in this financial aid process.
I wanted to add that I actually was one of those people who didn't know much about negotiating, and I waited to the last minute, but it actually did work. And the way I did it was, well, what I figured out is that the people who run financial aid, they usually don't know who you are. They didn't read your application. So I was asking for more money because my expected contribution was way too high. And it was a couple back and forths, and they would just lower it a little bit each time. And so what I ended up doing was, first of all, I took a financial aid letter from a comparable university, and then I sent it to them. And then I also emailed my admission counselor, who's the one who read my application. And then he reached out to the dean of financial aid to lower, and they lowered it way more significantly than when I was emailing the financial office myself. I didn't end up going because it was still too expensive, but definitely going through the person who read my application did a lot more than trying to email the person who just works there. Yeah, that's the best thing that I did in that regard.
That's the excellent point. Work with your admission rep, that admission counselor who you're working with, because to your point, they're the ones that have read your application. They know where you're from. They know your story. Versus the folks who sometimes are processing this financial aid stuff, they're just looking at the numbers. They're looking at spreadsheets. They don't know, what it means that your EFC might say 5,000 when in reality that may not be the case. And so always advocate for yourself. And if you don't know, how to ask, often your admission rep will be someone good to start with, and they can advocate for you because they want you. That admission rep wants you at that college. That's the secret, and they will do everything they can to make sure you can get to that college. So use them, leverage them to negotiate if you need to. Other questions, curiosities?
So I'm wondering if Gino has any questions, but if he doesn't, then I have another question for you. But I first would allow Gino some space if there's anything on his mind.
So I guess just going back to like when you were talking about the financial aid and how like sometimes there can be like a fee for filling it out or like applying for it. Could you just like elaborate on that and talk a little bit more on that because it like
Yeah.
confusing.
So often, and this is So it's FAFSA. It's the free application. So it's even in its name. And the government had to do that because there's so many groups charging people. They say, hey, I'll fill this out on your behalf. Don't do so, because often you see companies and people saying, hey, I'll fill this out for you and I'll guarantee that you get all the aid. What that might mean is that they're going to put in your information, your social security, your tax ID, and they might be manipulating those numbers to suggest that you might need more aid than you're actually eligible for. And the big piece that you don't want that to happen is that the government and colleges will often do an audit each year. And what that means is that they're going to randomly select people from their college and university students and say, hey, we need proof that you actually make this amount. And if someone fills that out on your behalf and lies, and you're not able to provide, if let's say you're selected for verification once you're in school, and you're not able to provide actual documents that prove that you actually earned that income, then you could be in hot water and having to repay back any of those grants and loans. So again, these groups will often market themselves as, maximizing your aid. That's not the case. You can do this from absolutely on your own. Follow that checklist. That checklist will give you everything. It's all information you or your parents or guardians or supporters, whoever has legal custody over you, if you're dependent, can provide. There's nothing outside of that that you would need. Make sure you're going on a FAFSA.gov. Any financial aid website is going to end on .gov. If you're on a .com, close that browser, delete it, block it, report it to spam, never go back on there because it's going to be suspect. So that's a big piece. We don't want students to fall into these kind of scams where they're charging you $50 when you could just submit that, and it takes like 30 to 40 minutes to submit online. It ain't it ain't going to be a fun process, but get it done. And it's, if it takes you 4 years to get in college, that's just 4 times you have to do it. So, and it's worth all the free money you can get.
So I was wondering, Sergio, if you could share some other grant names or grant programs that you are aware of that might be interesting and useful for for our campers to take a look at as they're applying for colleges and looking at financial situations.
Absolutely. So the biggest one that I can think of is the federal TRIO program. And so you might, if you're in high school right now, or in some college, you might already know about it. It might be known as a talent search or as Upward Bound. Or student support services. So essentially, it's a federal program that's created to assist low-income first-generation students. Myself, being the first student, I would have qualified, but I didn't know at the time that such a thing existed. So now they know better. I want to make sure all of you know that resource is available to you. But essentially, if you're in high school, talk to your high school counselor, if you have a guidance counselor or a good teacher that you're connected with, and say, hey, does our school offer any federal TRIO programs? They might say yes, because not every school does. And if so, inquire, how do I get involved? The benefit to that is that for many students, once they get to the college level, they actually become eligible to receive additional monies in support, free money, once you're there. And often you'll have to submit an application once you've started at college, and that can give you anywhere between $500 to a couple $1,000s of more money to assist you while you're there. Be mindful of, as you search for colleges and universities, if you're a first generation student, if you're the first one in your family to go earn a college degree, do a quick Google search of first generation colleges and scholarships. Go to imfirst.org or striveforcollege.org. And those are 2 websites that will list you all the colleges and universities that have specific first generation scholarships or programs at that college and universities. And often those scholarship programs have scholarships, have money, have free money that you would apply on top of whatever you might be getting because of FAFSA. And they might open the door for some really cool experiences. There might be programs that say, hey, if you're the first one in your family, you can study abroad for half the cost. And so do all that research. Again, it's overwhelming, but those are definitely resources out there. do you know any specific colleges, universities that you thought of, or are curious about?
So I'm interested in like pursuing psychology roughly, and I saw that like Yale and John Hopkins have really good programs and really good like psychology things. But I also know that those are like highly selective schools and that they're a bit harder to get into just because like they can be more expensive and more like just whatever. So I also looked for like safety schools or like schools that I know like would be a bit easier to get into and still provide a great education.
Hmm.
And the one that's really been like stuck on my mind for a while is the University of Nebraska.
Ooh, Omaha or Lincoln?
I think Omaha, but
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
Gotcha, gotcha. So actually, I almost worked there. So I know Omaha. They have a beautiful campus and they have fantastic professionals who work there. They specifically have a first gen program called the Thompson Scholars, Thompson Leadership, and that's actually funded by Warren Buffett, the really like one of the world's richest people in the in the whole world.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so checked out that program, the Thompson Learning Community. And it's a program for first gen, low income, I think even international students as well. And they give you one-on-one mentoring, support, financial aid assistance. At least a few years ago they did. I don't know what they do now, but it was really successful because students who were attending were graduating at higher rates, and graduating with a purpose and mission. So definitely, once you start seeing that kind of language of support for first gens and scholarships, feel free to copy and paste that and search on Google, because you'll find colleges and universities are replicating that. So it's really for you fighting what's the best fit, but also what's the one that makes most sense for you financially.